Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. It is the afternoon of November 4th, 2016, 4 days until the big vote. And let me make no secret of the theme of this broadcast. Get out and vote. Register. You've done that already. There are some places you can still register. Check it out. Inform yourself. Listen to this program, also on Monday. But don't wait. Don't wait for Monday. We don't know what Monday and Tuesday will look like. We have some reported quasi-terrorist events, right? There's some threat in New York City. There are other threats. We've got the sword of Damocles of the degenerate Julian Assange is hanging over our democracy, you know, like Lord Haw Haw in World War II. We've got, a threat to these institutions. So we have to make sure that we do something. And what you're going to do is vote. And what you're going to do is vote the Democratic ticket. That's all there is to do. And then, as I said, be ready on November 9th to start fighting, start pushing, start preventing the worst from happening. In other words, avoid the absolute worst and then fight against the relative worst. There are no illusions here, right? We know about triangulation. We know the whole thing. We've seen the Goldman Sachs speeches. We have no illusions. But like many other people who are reasonable and reality-oriented, we have to essentially avoid the absolute worst and then try to dig out of that hole from there. But the stuff about the greater good right now, this is in really bad faith coming from the Green Party and such people. All right. The international backdrop looks good. You might have seen on television the other night the Church of the Immaculate Conception, close to Mosul. It's about 20 kilometers away from downtown Mosul. The Church of the Immaculate Conception is Syrian Catholic or Syriac. They have a liturgy which is performed in Aramaic, the language, as far as we know, of Christ. It is Iraq's biggest church. There have been no services there since ISIS swept in 2 years ago. It is a basilica. Take a look at the pictures. It's a classic basilica. It's part of essentially the larger Roman Empire. And they had their first services in all that time. Now, we know the desperate demagogic defeatists of the Republican Party have already stabbed this defensive in the back by saying it's a mess, it'll never work, it's no good, and so on. So it's not a failure. The United States is not impotent. We got to go beyond mess, terrible, and rubble to words like victory and the defeat of this terrible enemy. Inside Mosul, we've had 50 ISIS fighters attempting to flee, and 50 of them have been executed. Maybe others have fled, but 50 captured, 50 executed. On the other side of the ledger, the Iraqi army has freed 6 more neighborhoods. They have been liberated. Take a look at various maps you can see on the internet from the northeast, that is along the axis from Qasir to Bartella and then into Mosul. You've got forces advancing, including Peshmerga. Also from Guer. The Guer axis is flowing together with the Bartella-Qasir axis coming in from the northeast. They are making satisfactory progress. Matter of fact, David Ignatius, who is a defeatist, on National Public Radio this morning said that his impression is that this is going substantially faster than any of the military commanders thought. From the south, from Qarara, we have another column of Iraqis this time. They are also advancing, although more slowly. Maybe the ISIS has decided that that's a more dangerous attack route. We're still in the aftermath of Baghdadi's speech from yesterday, generally interpreted as a sign of absolute desperation. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, Republicans. Essentially, the caliph is screaming, don't give up, don't leave me in the lurch, even as he leaves. I'm sure he's thinking about leaving his own people in the lurch. So the rebels, in this case, the ISIS rebels, are in bad shape. Then let's look over to Aleppo. Here we have the rebels are cynically bombarding the exit routes. In other words, the Russians and the Syrians have been saying for several days now, we have these exit corridors, use them, get out of here. ISIS is trying to capture or kill anybody trying to leave their caliphate paradise. And in particular, this is along that famous Castello Road that we were talking about on the north side of Aleppo. It's going to cost you $300 US to travel along one of those exit corridors with one of these coyotes. But to a lot of people, that looks like a good deal. However, minimal number of people have been able to get out because of the fanatical controls imposed by ISIS. Now, the other big news, of course, is that Erdogan has taken another step towards dictatorship. We'll talk about this in the coming days, especially on my other program, The American System. But in this case, it's a roundup of all of the parliamentary leaders of the Kurdish party. It's a step towards civil war in many ways. Erdogan crackdown has Turkey on edge as Kurdish leaders are jailed. That's Bloomberg. So that's pretty much what it is. We've even had one of the largest and best-known newspapers, the Cumhuriyet, I think this means Constitution, and they have essentially been shut down. Their editors and so forth have been arrested. So you're arresting the opposition? You're arresting the newspaper people? Hey, what does that sound like? So we can do something about that here. We're lucky we can still vote. Those poor people in Turkey at this point may not be able to. So your right to vote, use it or lose it. There's no excuse. Don't tell me you don't like professional politicians. Don't tell me that you don't like the personality of this or that candidate. This is 100 times bigger than any such petty, foolish, subjectivist, whining, carping criticisms. So that's Turkey, and we're also told that ISIS, in addition to executing deserters with huge executions, they're also trying to recruit child soldiers, right? They grab any kid they can and give that poor kid a gun. But the idea is the ISIS nightmare is dissipating. Beware the attempts of the Republicans to continue to conjure up the ISIS nightmare as if it were real. It is not real. ISIS is reeling, and they're not in a position to launch new land operations, right? Their territorial caliphate is gone. So that, I think, is extremely important. Oh, the other thing, of course, we want to remind people, Brexit, the great international success of this opposing coalition, right? The anti-civilization coalition, we can call it. They've been trumpeting and talking about their great victory in Brexit. Well, there still is, even though it's not written, there's a British Constitution. And it says there's the King, the Lords, and the Commons. And the Commons and the Lords will have to approve the Brexit. Theresa May wanted to do it all in secret. In secret. Wasn't that wonderful? Populists out there? Your girlfriend Theresa May wanted to do it all in secret. Now she won't. And the betting odds are now that Brexit may never happen. Welcome back. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. And remember to get a dose of reality and analysis and the Plato, Machiavelli, Leibniz vision of the world, at least what we strive for, tune in to the American System, americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv, and token fee, and you're in, and you will be able to get this every day. This weekend is when you really need it for next week, right? We'll produce a pre-election special that will be Closing Arguments Part 2. We're going to have Closing Arguments Part 1 and 1 plus today. But to get the full Closing Arguments Part 2, you got to subscribe. So please go and do that. So the ruling of the British High Court against Brexit is, of course, a good omen, right? All those superstitious people out there who like to take the auspices and, read the tea leaves, whatever. Wow, that's certainly bad news for Brexit. In other words, this Jacobin chaotic revolt against civilization, God knows what, all kinds of ways to describe it. Brexit is now subject to rollback because the House of Commons has to vote on these things. You can't abrogate and abdicate your responsibility. That was an advisory referendum, okay? And it won by 2 lousy points. And that's supposed to overthrow 40 years and more of British cooperation with the European Union. Remember, we had that Princeton scholar that I reported on a while back when he says it'll never happen, right? Remember the 2005 vote in France and the Netherlands against that reorganization, oligarchical reorganization though it was. They voted it down, but then it came back as the Lisbon Treaty. So the Eurogarchs have a history of not letting these referenda get in the way, and they have something on their side, right? In other words, you can't have civilization if every field is going to be reversed every 3 or 4 years. That's insane. So that's Brexit. Now let's look at the lawless situation here in the United States, right? 4 months, for years, I have told you that the U.S. government is factionalized, and you can see that in the behavior of the armed forces, right? You can see factions that actually want to fight terrorism and others that want to manage it and use it, and so forth. So what we now have, and what I think everybody can see, right? This has been in numerous published sources. The FBI has factions, and in particular, the FBI has a clique in the New York field office, which somehow thinks that it's up to the FBI to choose the president. I've checked my pocket constitution, can't find it. It talks about something called the Electoral College, but it doesn't say Federal Bureau of Investigation decides the election by leaks. Now, it is not a glowing commentary on Obama that things have reached this point. Why did he ever put that Comey in there, a Republican, somebody who had gone along with all of the liberticide surveillance and other excesses of the Ashcroft and Gonzalez and related people in the Department of Justice, right? Comey is no hero. Comey is not somebody who has a visceral rejection of torture. Believe me, that's not Comey. You can see that he's a cunning bureaucratic player. It's time for him to take his hat and go. It's time for his resignation to be tendered, or if he won't take a hint, then he has to be fired. And then we have all these people in the what we can call the Breitbart faction of the FBI in the New York City field office. Now, I'm leaning here on one of the best things that old Rachel Maddow ever did on MSNBC. You could see it. It's a 20-minute piece from last night, from Thursday, the 3rd of November. And here we find that the people who are leaking this are, by and large, in league with former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who, of course, is a former U.S. attorney, former deputy attorney general, and things like this. And Giuliani, on October 26th on Fox News, told a breathless blonde commentator on Fox News, we have something up our sleeve. It's a surprise. You'll see. You'll see. And then 2 days later, we have the Comey letter. Some people say, well, Comey just used to work for Giuliani, and he's acting out his obedience that he conceived of then. But there's something actually more. I'm sure that's a factor. That's a factor for sure. There's also this question, which Rachel Maddow stresses, about Robert Mercer, right? Another billionaire who has financed the super PAC that helps Trump, former director of the super PAC, Kellyanne Conway, now the campaign boss. The other one, Bossy, he's also in there with Trump. And from Breitbart, we have, of course, Bannon, Robert Mercer, big investor in Breitbart. Watch out also for that guy Yiannopoulos, right? That purveyor of decadent forms of expression. So, notice also these people, they want the Confederate flag everywhere, right? If you couldn't see it any other way, you got to see it that way, right? The Union dead are not sleeping soundly tonight with that Confederate flag somehow close to the White House. So, Mark Hosenball, a lot of these people have been around since Iran-Contra, but Hosenball writes about the fact that the predicate, the starting point for a supposed investigation of Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation comes from the Government Accountability Institute, apparently funded by Mercer interests or interests in the Mercer orbit. And from that comes this book, Clinton Cash. So a highly partisan, slanted, unscholarly, right, non-objective, right, not peer-reviewed, if you want that. Clinton Cash makes all these allegations. So the Breitbart faction in the New York City field office of the FBI says we can use this as the starting point for a big probe, and that way we can indict Hillary before the election. Now, this stuff came out a couple of days ago. We're told in the interim that this faction clique has been shut down, that they will not be able to indict Mrs. Clinton before the election. This breathless claim had come from Bret Baier on Fox News. Who knows what faction he's working with. But this has now been denied by ABC, NBC, and so forth. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Commending to your kind attention, AmericanSystem.tv, AmericanSystem.tv, to hear yours truly. Not just one day a week, but 5 days a week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we have the program on the American System. So, again, the Government Accountability Office, or Institute, private group, private, from the orbit of these pro-Trump billionaires, funded a book called Clinton Cash, and that then became the basis for starting an FBI investigation. We had a manic report from Bret Baier on earlier this week, and it looked like there was going to be an indictment. That was the big quote, an indictment, and all the right-wingers had it. All the reactionaries were parroting that. Then we had, thank goodness, Pete Williams of NBC, longtime Justice Department correspondent, and others pointing out that there is no such investigation, or there is no such indictment looming, right? Not an indictment. Even an indictment can mean anybody. What does it mean? Today, Ruth Marcus from the Washington Post says the Washington Post survey of Department of Justice and FBI employees is that the overwhelming majority are sick at heart sick about the excesses of Comey. And what I have tried to point out is there would obviously possibly be an attempt to issue something. Now remember, the FBI cannot indict anybody. The Department of Justice can. The FBI cannot. The FBI is an investigative agency, right? It says of investigation, not of indictment. So it has to be the Department of Justice with Loretta Lynch and her deputies. These people are obviously somewhat feckless, but we can think that they would try to hold the line on something like that. They've also been warned now, right? Obama came out and said, we do not operate on innuendo. If you go back to 4 years ago, Benghazi was, of course, an October surprise against Obama to get Romney out in and Obama out. In the week or two after the election, we had the ouster of Petraeus at the CIA. We had the ouster of General Allen, who has now gotten himself back in through the Hillary campaign. And then there were dozens of flag-rank military officers who seemed to have been part of something, right? Was it a betting pool on the Preakness? That would be 7 days in May. But something like that was going on behind the scenes. And I think you better get ready for some, if you're following the D.C. real estate market, there are going to be some people from the intelligence community who are going to be looking for new employment here after the election, right? Soon after the election. And it can't come soon enough because this is outrageous. This is absolutely impossible. I don't care about a 10-year term. Nobody has a 10-year term. Everybody serves at the behest of the president. Pleasure of the president. He's the only one elected by all the people. Comey never was. None of these other people was. So I think that's important. The Department of Justice has done one interesting thing. They have sent election monitors to North Carolina because of the emerging stubborn pattern of violations by these Republicans who are, of course, trying to institute the permanent austerity dictatorship, and part of that is to deprive people of their right to vote. We have Kurt Eichenwald, in Newsweek with an interesting article, Why Russia is Backing Trump. Now, whether the Kremlin, I don't know. I'm still a bit skeptical, but certainly the news media, absolutely, and RT, they're falling all over themselves for Trump. The goal here is to try to weaken or possibly smash NATO. That's what Trump talks about. We have another interesting article about how Russia has sought to influence and otherwise, what can we say, manipulate the current Republican candidate, and that, of course, is very disturbing. So, again, we're interested in looking beyond Trump. I think the current Republican candidate will soon, I think, recede into the background one way or the other. But you're left with Russia. So Russia you have to work with, the Republican candidate, rather less so. So all of that is going. Now, I've heard Limbaugh today, Friday, the 4th of November, and he's going on about how the Republican candidate is going to win. And, of course, this is it's quite transparent. You can see what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to keep their troops together. Oh, and this thing about the indictment for Hillary. The Hillary indictment coming out of this crazy book, Clinton Cash and the Breitbart faction in the New York FBI field office, that's to fabricate a myth so that in the likely possibility that the Republican candidate is defeated, that you'll be able to keep the Republican Party together, this time organizing these poor dupes and gulls around the hope that Hillary will be indicted and impeached, and that there is hope, and that they should keep writing checks for the Republican Party, up ballot, down ballot, whatever it is. All right. Now, Charlie Cook, a couple of days ago says there's an uphill fight for the Republican nominee. Larry Sabato in his crystal ball at the University of Virginia. The Hillary Clinton floodgates are holding. Now, it's a balance of enthusiasm, fanaticism, and fear. The black turnout is slightly down. Now, the only way to discuss the black turnout being slightly down is to note that this is the result of years and years of work by the Republican totalitarian forces who have wanted to suppress the black vote, and they have done that by making it harder to vote. And that is paying off now to some extent. I'm looking for this Sunday to be a big turning point. Some of those black churches go directly from the church to the polling places in vans. So it's voter suppression. You got to be talking about that. There is no voter fraud. There is vote suppression, which is done top down with these repressive and really bureaucratic authoritarian methods. Now, watch out for real clear politics. I've been talking about the reliable polls and those that are less so for quite a few weeks and months here. So look, you look at the real clear politics on the big picture, right? The average, the poll of polls, right? And they'll tell you that it's Clinton 46.6 and Trump 45.0. And what goes into that? What goes into that? Well, then you look down, and one is Investors Business Daily says it's a tie. That's part of that average. Rasmussen says it's a tie. And Gravis, meaning Breitbart, says Hillary is up 1. Now, suppose you eliminate the Brand X polls. You'll then see ABC says Hillary +3. London Economist says Hillary +3. Reuters Ipsos says Hillary +8. CBS says Hillary +3. So it's a 4.25% lead if you average those and eliminate the Brand X. Now, other estimates, according to a number of sources that I've tried to merge. Hillary Clinton ahead in Florida, Michigan, Maine, Virginia, Pennsylvania. She's headed for 311 electoral votes. 311. And we'll tell you Trump in just a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. So we're looking at real clear politics, right? It changes quite often now because there are a lot of polls. Right now it's Hillary Clinton in their poll of polls, right? Everything averaged together. Now it's not 2.6, it's up 2.4, but we've still got Investors Business Daily calling it a tie, Rasmussen Reports calling it a tie, and Gravis calling it up 1. So this is unreliable. Here is my advice to everybody. Turn away from these aggregating sites where they aggregate the national polls. This is one of them. And take a look at the Princeton Election Consortium. That's the one. Princeton Election Consortium. Gratified as I am to salute anything from Princeton. Here we go. And this is done by an actual scholar, Professor Sam Wang, PhD. And his email already, he repeats his prognosis from the pre-Comey. He says, it is totally over. If Trump wins more than 240 electoral votes, I will eat a bug. And some people are saying, you're a defeatist. He's not even going to get to that. So here's what they say. The difference here is Princeton Election Consortium is now much more like what's going to happen because, there's no national vote. But there are 51 individual state-by-state votes, and that's how the electoral votes are assigned, right? State by state. We know this, right? Federal system. So they have now gone through 209 state polls, and they find Clinton 312 electoral votes, Trump 226 electoral votes, Clinton's meta margin 2.6%, Clinton's win possibility is 98%, her Bayesian win possibility 99%. For the Senate, Democrats get 50. This is on 48 polls. Democrats 50, GOP 50. The Democrats are ahead by 0.8%, and the probability of the Democratic control of the Senate 77%. And notice, this is updated hourly. This is serious. As of November 4th, today, right now, at 3:06 p.m., well, right now, it's almost 4 now, but you get the idea. This is what's going on. And I want you to go to tarpley.net, or go, maybe better yet, go to americansystem.tv. You will see the state-by-state version of the Scholastic Magazine K through 12 poll, which we had a week or two ago, right? Hillary Clinton won it. But now you see it as an electoral map. And the map today gives Hillary Clinton 57% of the popular vote to 43% for Trump, and 439 electoral votes for Hillary against, and the Democrats above all, to 99 votes for Trump in the Electoral College. And you can look at this, right? Idaho is blue, Utah is blue, Texas is blue, Indiana is blue, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, all blue. And that's a map of a country that can survive and compete and reform itself and be a decent place to live in the 21st century, because the Republican Party, whose only project is to sabotage, shut down, bankrupt, and mutilate the government, as, for example, by destroying Article 3 of the Constitution, by shutting down and wiping out the Supreme Court, by just letting it wither on the vine. Remember? Gingrich said that stuff. Well, let it wither on the vine, or get it so small you can drown it in the bathtub. Well, that's who they are, right? You know their motto: government doesn't work, elect us and we'll prove it. So if you're going to keep voting for that, you're doomed. And it looks like youth, K through 12, can see that this is so. So the hope is that the Scholastic Magazine poll of Clinton versus Trump today, again, americansystem.tv, or as you go to tarpley.net, you see that this is as the Princeton Election Consortium says, will that be the Electoral College map of 2024? Well, fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray. So here's my other poll, right? The objective poll. How about that one? Remember, we had the very interesting poll from Moody's Analytics, right? And Moody's Analytics found that Hillary Clinton was going to win based on a poll. It's actually not a poll. It's a survey. They don't ask anybody their opinion. It doesn't have anything to do with any specific candidate. It's simply a series of objective criteria, and then seeing how that behaved in the past. You can make certain predictions. So the Moody's Analytics, this guy Zandy, right? We've seen him, not the best, but in this case doing something of value. They're going to tell you that Hillary will win. While that is loading, let me just tell you what the new objective factors are. It doesn't ask anybody, do you like Joe Schmo, or do you prefer Jane Doe, or whatever it is. 163,000 jobs were generated according to the figures that came out this morning, right? Labor Department says it's now 74 months of job creation. Not good enough, but a whole lot better than it was 8 years ago. Let's ask the famous question from Reagan and Carter debates. Are you better off now than you were 8 years ago? 8 years ago, people were terrified. 8 years ago, it was 800,000 jobs per month being lost, 200,000 per week. That's almost, practically 50,000 per day, or 40,000 per day. 40,000 jobs per day, and that gets around to you fairly fast. Lots of people were losing their houses, and there was a general sense of chaos and of great fear. Now, don't forget that fear, because the Republicans are now asking to come back. And it's not just their presidential candidate. It's the Ryans. It's the Pences. It's those guys, the McCains. who brought you all that under Bush. So the unemployment rate is now down to 4.9%. Last year we had a 5% increase in household income. Gas price, 2.25. Home prices up. So those are the kinds of objective factors that give the advantage to the party in power, to the incumbent party. Now they make a deduction. They say if it's your third term in a row, right, a two-term president or whatever it is, followed by another one, then they penalize you for that. But still, it doesn't matter. The Republican candidate still loses. So the Moody's Analytics says for Clinton, 332 electoral votes, and Trump with 206. This has forecast the winner for many a moon. Now, go and vote. We could have cyber chaos, right? Use the opportunity now. Many, many states still, Maryland for one. In Maryland, just as an example, the early voting ended last night. We had 7 days of early voting. And I voted. You should vote too. Live like me. So we had all that. And but now you can still get on the internet and print out an application for an absentee ballot, sign that, fill it out, send it in, get it in the mail today, get it in the mail tonight. In many places we still have Saturday delivery, but not for long. It'll be privatized. So take advantage of Saturday delivery while you still have it and get that out. It'll be received on the Monday, right? So find ways to vote and get it done before whatever cyber chaos may be induced on Monday and Tuesday, right? Get it onto paper. That's the big advantage. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. It's the 4th of November, and we want to remind people, AmericanSystem.tv, AmericanSystem.tv. You really need this next week because God knows what's going to happen. The more chaotic it is, the more you're going to need the American System, which you can find at AmericanSystem.tv, AmericanSystem.tv. So, put this stuff all together. Here, let me make a preliminary prediction, what's going to happen, at least a range, and I will try to refine this on Monday. So make sure you subscribe to the American System and tune in on Monday, because there you will get my final prediction. If we go back to Obama-Romney 4 years ago, we will see that in the popular vote, Obama led Romney by 3.9%, so call it 4%, and got 332 more electoral votes. I think we can now estimate that the range is now somewhere between the Princeton Election Consortium giving Clinton 312 and perhaps as much as 332. 332. This would in particular involve the possibility of winning the 15 electoral votes of North Carolina, much sought after state, right? 15 electoral votes in play there. That would get it up to 327, and there might be some other items that might be also available. So that's what I'm saying. Hillary Clinton will take the White House by between 311, 312 electoral votes to 332. So the 20-point range there. And the popular vote is, I would say, about 6%. It's essentially the 4% lead for Hillary that's showing on the various polls, but removing the Brand X polls and adding in about 2 points for the Democratic ground game. That's it. So Hillary Clinton wins, and we'll tell you the exact amount on Monday. Now, for the Congress, just very quickly, Princeton Consortium says the Senate will be 50-50. That means Democrat, assuming that Vice President Kaine will come in there and vote it. They said there's a 74% chance of that. If we look at Rothenberg, he points us to Coates of Indiana in trouble, Blunt of Missouri in trouble, Burr of North Carolina in trouble, Ayotte of New Hampshire in trouble, Toomey of Pennsylvania in trouble. Those are toss-ups. Then we have tilting Democratic Ron Johnson in Wisconsin to be defeated by Feingold. The latest one shows a 2% lead for Feingold. Leaning Democratic, we have Kirk in Illinois. And let's just remind people that some of those are rather interesting polls that have come in, right, as the latest polls. I think you get a kind of a sense that there's just the beginning of an uptick, a kind of a mini surge at this point for the Democrats. For example, in Virginia, it's Clinton up 7. In Wisconsin, even after the Marquette, this is now the Loras poll. I don't know what that is, but it seems to track the Marquette. And it's she's up by about half a dozen votes. Clinton plus 6. Okay? So these items they're important and they're essential because do not despair. Do not despair. Act. Do something or you'll regret it. You don't want to be part of that, 1 or 2 votes per precinct could have changed the entire picture. Now, in the House, we've essentially got 33 seats in play. Well, some of those are Democratic seats, of course, but if 33 are in play, then 40 can be in play if something happens. 7 of these are Democratic, so it's about 24 Republican seats. In particular, 5 of them are tilting Democratic. 5 of them see the Democrat ahead, and in the toss-up category, we have about 9 of them. So it's possible that the House might flip also. Now, final arguments. We did some of this on the other program, on the American system, but let's talk about the world as it confronts us right now. Freedom and liberty, the Constitution, themes that probably have not gotten enough discussion, certainly have not, which are now threatened, right? We have people who are saying, and I think they're right. We've got, some pretty well-known people saying that, this is we're facing the possible end of civilization as we've known it, right? Is that enough for some stupid little prejudice about your ideal picture of who should be president? I really don't think so. The end of civilization, social chaos, an absolute cascade of futile violence, the bringing out of the id, ugly and horrible as that is, at all levels of society. One guy says, I fear for the country. Another guy, Obama, says, the fate of the republic is in your hands. I would say the civilization as we've known it that you have to defend, that's the heart of the matter. So where do we stand? Let's look at now 10 points. I've assembled 10 points. I can't do justice to all of them, but a lot of these you can figure out. The points of political freedom where our liberties are in danger. First of all, most urgent, the government by secret police. And this is what Comey has done, that FBI cell, the Breitbart cell in New York City, at the FBI field office, leaking things about emails, my God, leaking things about laptops, knowing that everybody's sick of emails. They have some stuff about Mark Rich, who's now long dead. And this is from a faction of the FBI. Now, it is not sure how numerous they are. It is not sure how the opinion polls stack up in other agencies, but this absolutely outrageous. And there's got to be there have got to be consequences for the careers of the people involved in this. That's another one. That's okay. So point number 1, do you want government by secret police? I've always said, intelligence factions favorable to the Republican Party are likely to launch a strategy of tension leading to an October surprise. And now it happened. So trust me, I know what I'm doing. Secondly, the qualifications for the presidency, these are listed in the Constitution, right? It says what you have to be the president, right? And it is 35 years old, born in the United States. No person except a natural-born citizen, 35 years and 14 years a resident within the United States. Those are the qualifications. The Republican candidate goes around saying Hillary Clinton should not be allowed to run. Who allows somebody to run? American mothers have always told their children, you can grow up to be president, so work hard. It doesn't say if some commission allows you, you'll then be allowed to run. No, this is a birthright for everybody. Anybody can be a presidential candidate, including a felon, because the qualifications are what the Constitution says. Remember the Constitution, all you constitutional conservatives out there? So we don't want a situation like China where the candidates are screened in advance. There are other countries that do it too. It may be fine for them, but it's not fine here, not after 240 years of self-government. We don't need allowed to run. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're here in Washington, D.C. So the points where you are in danger of losing your precious personal political freedoms: government by secret police. Want to go back to the era of J. Edgar Hoover, that is to say, of twisted oligarchs who make decisions for an entire country and are essentially impossible to get out of there. The qualifications for the presidency, in other words, is that open to anybody? Can anybody aspire, or do you have to be allowed to run? And who's going to make that decision, right? A board of billionaires? No, thank you. Another one, the First Amendment. Well, I speak about that, right? I'm being sued, and anybody else can, right? There have been 3 threats against the New York Times, 1 threat against the Club of Growth, against People magazine, against 12 different women, and on and on and on. The First Amendment is being trampled. There's an overt plan to open it up so that it's easier to sue people. And this essentially is a chilling of the traditional freedom of speech. And that means freedom of thought, because from thought to speech is direct. And if you chill the speech part, then you've chilled the thought part too. So the death of the American spirit, if you want the truth. Are we going to go back to the time of seditious libel? This is pre-Zenger. It's not even pre-Sullivan versus New York Times. It's pre-Zenger in the 1740s, right? Where if you say something that some rich, powerful person, government official doesn't like, then you can be tossed away. On the other program, I went through the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act of 1917, and also the Alien and Sedition Acts of the Adams administration around 1798. We have laws that some of them are still on the books, right? The Espionage Act sure is. Those are there to be used, right, by some unbalanced administration coming in. We've also got then the third point. Are we going to have violent gangs ranging across the landscape? Are we going to have militias in action? We've seen them. Are we going to have the Bundy gang in action? Are we going to have the Ku Klux Klan? We know who got their endorsement. Are we going to have people of the caliber of David Duke? And remember the Kentucky governor, Republican, who said, Jefferson wants us to water the tree of liberty with the blood of patriots every now and then. What is that supposed to mean? And it seemed to be directed against Hillary Clinton. We were told that Second Amendment people would take care of Hillary Clinton and would also take care of any Supreme Court justices she might get installed on the bench. We were told that it would be interesting to strip the Secret Service detail of Mrs. Clinton of their guns and see what would happen then. We have all those things to worry about. It's a kind of injection of violence into this entire situation. Then we have three of them that involve the right to vote and the conduction of elections, right? Poll watchers. We're talking about hooligans being sent into polling places to try to cause trouble, to try to intimidate people, to try to threaten them, to try to suppress the vote. And notice, they don't have to succeed very much to slow the whole thing down. So suppose you've got one of these states that have been freed from the Voting Rights Act very unwisely by the Scalia court, and they, the Voting Rights Act is kaput. There's no prior, there's no, getting that cleared in advance. They can do whatever they want, and then the Justice Department has to go to court. So what happens then is these guys get in there. There are very few places to vote, huge long line, and you get some hooligan causing a half hour or an hour incident, right? And then some of the people are peeling off and have to go home. And at that point, maybe a certain candidate wins who was not going to win in the normal course of events. Now, the Republican Party is still under that consent decree as regards New Jersey from 1982. The Republican National Committee is not allowed to interfere with voters there. And we've just had a federal court in Pennsylvania say the same thing. So that stuff about self-appointed vigilantes going into polling places, no, I'm sorry. And then there's the legal form of this, right, which, as we've said, is the voter suppression laws, right? Again, voter fraud is practically non-existent, but voter suppression is rampant. And it's done against blacks, against Latinos, against students, against old people, and on and on. We have to see what happened to absentee ballots. The soldiers might have been shortchanged too. That'll be interesting to see. So that's all going on. Then there's also this question, will the losing candidate respect the result of the election? Right? Because remember, we want a peaceful transfer of power. When the Constitution in the preamble says that we're interested in ensuring domestic tranquility, let's just read what the goals are. A more perfect union, establishing justice, ensuring domestic tranquility, providing for the common defense, promoting the general welfare, and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We have this Constitution. So that means that the tranquility, we don't want civil war. We don't want domestic violence. We don't want fighting in the streets. Therefore, everybody has to enter into this pact, which is compulsory by law, and you're on the jurisdiction. You have to respect the result of the election, and any suggestion to any other degree is, at that point, we wonder, how can you be allowed to run for office, right? Isn't that, absolutely out of the question? So, respect the election result. One candidate says she will, the other one, hard to tell. Then we have this other issue. Suppose we've got all of these attempts to suppress the vote, to bust the unions, we've got violence breaking out. Suppose there are cases that are undecided. We say, well, let's try to appeal to the Supreme Court, right? Everybody gets a statutory right to appeal to the local circuit court of appeals, but how about the Supreme Court? Well, under the Republican system, there may not be a Supreme Court. They may have died off. The whole Article 3 of the Constitution may have been shredded, and I'm not kidding. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So, in a future election, you're going to have to wonder, will voter suppression measures make it impossible or impossibly impractical or excruciatingly painful. Some people can't do it. They can't stand online, right? Old people, maybe there are other factors like that. So there are sort of objective physical factors. Either under color of law, bad, by hooligans and goons, worse, and then by the fact that one candidate says, you can do what you want, I don't respect it. And we're hearing pretty much that kind of thing, saying, we don't care who you vote for, we're going to impeach that person. We're going to impeach. Okay? And we're also hearing, as I said, from Republican senators, some of the media heroes like McCain and also Cruz, who had quite a following, they say, we won't allow any new Supreme Court justices to be approved. So right now it's 4-4. Suppose one of them dies and it becomes a Republican majority. Then they're going to rush to get a whole bunch of reactionary things approved, and then that person might die and it might go back to 3-3. But right now it's 4-4. This is impossible. This is a direct attack on the Constitution, and there's got to be a president. Remember what the Constitution says. The president shall take care that the laws be faithfully enforced. Then we have this interesting trope, the jailing of the opposition. Put her in jail after the election. Special prosecutor, and then maybe a special court, right? In Germany, they had Roland Freisler in the special tribunals. Mussolini also. Special tribunals, tribunali speciali. So, jailing the opposition. Arrest her, lock her up. I think they even got to burn her at the stake. Some of that stuff is getting into incitement to riot. And there was a brief investigation in one of these places in North Carolina where the Republican candidate was saying, go beat that guy up. That is illegal, right? That's not covered by the First Amendment. So we have all of those problems. Another important issue stretches across much of the Constitution is, are you going to have due process? And due process would imply, First Amendment, of course, we've talked about it already, but in the Fifth Amendment, as far as the federal government goes, and in the 14th Amendment, as far as the state governments go, you're not allowed to deprive anybody of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That means if somebody's on the territory, in the jurisdiction, they've got to have a court hearing before you can deport them. No, says one candidate, because we know that they're here illegitimately. How do we know that? How do we know that they weren't born here? Maybe they're a little bit browner than you think, but that is not the criterion. There's also, along with this, the Sixth Amendment, right? Do you get a lawyer? You have a right to a speedy trial. How about a lawyer? You certainly have a right to a lawyer, but that's not going to be part of it. So the whole notion of due process goes out the window. So I think that gets us up to 10. We'll count them. Maybe we'll even write these up over the weekend, God willing. But I also wanted to add, just in terms of the mass deportation, you take a look at that Calais jungle operation, right? In the past week, France has dispersed and, they've distributed the people living in that crazy Calais jungle camp. They've distributed those all over France. This is an operation of 10, 15,000? I still don't have a satisfactory number. I think it's being hidden. But they've been put on, some of them have been put on buses. They go to, Bordeaux or Marseille or Lille or wherever, and that's fine. Some of them refuse to go. Some of them are minor children. It is extremely complicated and extremely expensive. And this is a very limited thing compared to the 12 million minimum that we're going to be told are on their way to being ousted. You can just see the kinds of chaos and the breakdown of law and order which would be essential. Now, the French have also done it in a fairly mild way, right? They don't have holding cages. They don't have people in soccer stadiums with armed guards all around, right? They have some of that, but they have not gone all out in that department. So this is, I think, a fundamental question, right? Do you want to be free? Are you going to roll over for a very oppressive regime, something much, much worse? Right? We've been told there has to be surveillance. There has to be surveillance. I'm sorry, I don't see it in those terms. Now, economics. We just had a meeting of the Freedom Caucus with Ryan in the last couple of days, right? And the Freedom Caucus wants more power. They want to bring their crazy reactionary legislation directly to the floor, right? Not being screened by Ryan, right? They want to have the right to put up anything they want for a hook because they want to be seen by their backward constituents as supporting that stuff. I would say, by and large, the current Republican ticket is a transition to a new, lower phase, an inferior phase of the current low-wage economy. The low-wage economy goes back essentially to the Volcker era. For many people, that's Carter and Reagan, but it's really Volcker. And that's also known as the Great U-Turn. I write about this in Surviving the Cataclysm. So what we're getting now, behind all this circus, right, because this is it's not talked about. Most people can't see it. But my estimate, as a seasoned observer of this stuff, is we're going into a new phase of a low-wage economy. And one of the things that's going to be absolutely important are these privatizations. Now, the Republican candidate says that he won't cut Social Security, he won't let people die in the streets. But notice, he's not going to be making those decisions. That's going to be Ryan and to some extent Pence. And what are they devoted to? They believe in the Republican Party doctrine of destroying the Franklin D. Roosevelt New Deal, social safety net, and the other economic conquests of the American people after hundreds of years of history. So the privatizations will clearly involve the Veterans Administration. The Social Security will be divided into individual accounts, and massive commissions will flow into the pockets of Wall Street brokers, even as the benefits are cut, because that's the plan they still have. That plan came out years ago, and it had all that in it under Bush, in effect, and it just wouldn't fly. But they're going to try it again now with the atmosphere of increased demagogy, thanks to the obvious factors. So the privatizations, what did we say? Social Security, Medicare, that will become a voucher, right? The Ryan plan, you get a voucher and you're on your own. And if you run out of money, too bad for you. So that is the idea of this, the attractiveness of the individual account. It means that the risk has been transferred from the government to you, little people. Open your eyes. And Social Security, Medicare, Veterans Administration, and of course the Postal Service, which will mean, when that's privatized, that will mean the economic death of rural America. Because if you can't have decent Postal Service, you can't run a business that sells to any place, beyond the city limits. You got to have the Postal Service. Isn't that ironic? Some of the people who are going to be looking forward to voting for the Republican ticket are going to be among the first to lose out. Now, we're told, bring the jobs back. What does that mean? It essentially says, let's take low-wage, labor-intensive jobs that were transferred out, say from 1980 until now 2000 or whatever, 2005. Bring those back, because the idea is now you can have lower real wages. And welcome back to World Crisis Radio, Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. So let's just wrap up on the economic side here in a very general way. Those jobs somebody wants to bring back, you don't want those jobs. They can stay right there. Those are dead-end jobs, right? That's the technology of 20 or 30 years ago when the stuff, when the runaway shop took them over the horizon. No. Now we want advanced manufacturing. We want the highest level, the frontier of technology and science We're told that Pittsburgh used to be a steel town, and now it's biomedical. That's sort of the idea, although you need something a little bit more than that. You've got to produce tangible physical products, right, which can be plasmas or other things, right? You want to have a space program. You want to have a high-energy physics, plasma physics program. You want to have a biomedical program. So those are the jobs of the future, and above all, advanced manufacturing. Right? It's not belching smokestacks. It's people going around in what looks like surgical gowns with face masks. Right? You've seen them. Now, obviously, with the Republicans in power, and this is whatever the nominee says, it doesn't matter. Ryan will have the say, and Pence will execute that stuff from the White House. So the reactionary Republicans and this Tea Party caucus, Freedom Caucus, they're going to be speaking louder and louder, and they're going to have more and more impact on your life with their, dark ages policy. So there will be no unions. Your right to vote will continue to be attrited. And how about some of this tax stuff? The nominee says, they can't bring the money back because they can't, right? So we have to cut the rate, 3, 4, 5 trillion. And instead of taxing that at 35%, which is what the law says, bring it down to 10. I guess the Republican nominee is so addicted to not paying taxes that he thinks this can be extended in all directions. And we're also told that the business tax will go from 35 to 10. Or is it 15? Anyway, it doesn't matter. And the top rate will come down from almost 40 to about 30. This is a bonanza for banks, hedge funds, speculative interests, some manufacturing, yes, but not enough to make this possible. And the deficit will balloon to 450 trillion per year. And once again, you'll be getting nothing for it. All right. So this is a very grim economic future. Now, concerning culture and personalities, we have high respect for classical civilization. I mean, we're very interested in not so much that we respect it because it went wrong, but the lessons of classical civilization, especially things like, the Roman history of Titus Livius, Roman Republic, Tacitus, Suetonius, that too. We're highly interested in all that because we get lessons, right? And Polybius, of course, is the basis of Machiavelli. Machiavelli is the basis of John Adams and the Massachusetts Constitution. So there's a great deal to be learned there. A word that has come to mind about the overall quality of the current culture is scurrilous. Scurrilous. And Dr. Johnson, right? Samuel Johnson, back in the 18th century, he defined scurrilous as using such language as only the license of a buffoon can warrant. I think he's got a Latin adverb, scurrile, coarsely joking, and buffoon-like. But let's go through. I went and looked up all the different versions of scurrilous, and you can see that it includes, man about town. It means a playboy. It means a dandy. Or how about rake, right? Like the rake's progress. This kind of world of debauchery and gambling and vicious interpersonal squabbles among oligarchs, this is a very unhealthy world. I think we have to ask ourselves what is going on here, right? From some of the talk you hear, right, we're told that Mrs. Clinton is the devil. We're told that other people are demons, right? They have to be demonized. You have to remember, one of the advantages of Western civilization is the result of having had the wars of religion, right? The wars of religion started essentially 499 years ago this month, this week practically, right? Remember Halloween, Halloween 1517, Martin Luther went and nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral. And that triggered a good 150 years, give or take, of religious warfare. The Schmalkaldic League in Germany, right? We know them. But above all, the 30 Years' War. And the 30 Years' War, war of religion, is the most destructive war that we've seen, probably in the West, at least in the last, certainly in the last 500 years, in the sense that the 30 Years' War killed about 1/3 of the population of Central Europe. This is a lot. This is more than died in the Second World War. So it's 1/3 of Central Europe. Now, what came out of that was a kind of a reaction, right? We know Paul Hazard has written about the crisis of the European consciousness and stuff like this. So around 1700, 1725, something like that, people have turned to secularism, right? There's a secularism, and of course the United States is a product of this, right? That we have separation of church and state. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This is the secularism which has grown out of seeing the horrors of religious war. Now, we have social movements now, and if you don't believe me, look on the internet, right? You're going to find people who are, let's say they're at the ragged edge of human civilization, and they seem to wish to return to these questions of who's a witch, who should be burned, who is a demon, who is a devil. This essentially means that we'd be throwing something overboard which is very valuable and which was bought very dearly, right? Very expensive to get this done in historical terms. Lots of people died, in other words, 1/3 of Central Europe. And we've had this in the United States all the way up to, the Salem witch trials in the 1690s, right? We can't have this. This is the negation of civilization. Now, we were lucky, right? We pulled out of it a little bit earlier than some of these other places, but it went on for a long time. And if you look at Western civilization compared to some others, the fact that we've been through the wars of religion, we had a Reformation, which I regard as unnecessary, and then wars of religion, which I think are downright, self-destructive, futile, needless, whatever. And I've written about it, right? That's my story of the coming of the 30 Years' War. Take a look at it. It's a doctoral dissertation, among other things. So you got to understand, that's a big advantage, especially for the United States, right? We have more or less solved the problem of church and state, but now we're getting people who are inspired. Some of them are inspired by a very narrow and rigid and brittle version of religion, right, who they think they're under fire. And then you have others who don't really believe in any kind of religion and who seem to be the most fanatical of all about the demons and the witches and who should get burned and the rest of it. So I urge you, if I don't speak to you again before the election, vote for the continuation of civilization as we have known it. Vote against barbarism. Vote to maintain the U.S. Constitution. It's the best deal we're going to have, and we better keep every piece of it that we have right now. See you next week on World Crisis Radio.